Hello everyone. Tonight we slip into the dusty sandals of ancient Greece, where the gods are shiny, the mortals are sweaty, and the drama is more intense than a group project gone wrong. You're standing at the edge of Mount Olympus, squinting into the eternal glare of divine brilliance, but you don't feel particularly inspired. No thunderbolts, no wild quests, just a goddess staring out into space. Demeter. Yes, the wheat one, not the lightning or war or wine one, is perched on a marble bench, chin in hand, eyes glazed like she's in the third hour of a meeting that could have been an email. The air smells like ripe figs and wild thyme, warm and lazy. Around her, other gods are up to their usual mischief. Poseidon's flooding something again. Hera's side-eyeing Zeus for reasons we won't get into tonight, and Hermes is already halfway through a new pair of winged sandals. But Demeter, she's just existing. You probably won't survive this, not because of monsters or curses, but from sheer divine boredom. And somehow from that cosmic yawn came the 4 seasons. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the time you're listening in the comments. I love seeing where and when you all tune in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trail behind Demeter as she walks the clouded paths of Olympus. She's surrounded by immortality luxury and the kind of breakfast spreads that would bankrupt a small country grape's golden honey ambrosia. But it's all dull. After a few millennia, even nectar starts tasting like wallpaper paste. She watches Ares flex and Athena monologue about strategic wisdom. She yawns. There's something peculiar about being a goddess of growing things when nothing in your own life is growing. You don't marry. You don't fight. You don't even get a dramatic backstory with a monster or a stolen eyeball. Demeter's just there, watching, waiting, occasionally making barley sprout with a lazy flick of her fingers. The Olympian group chat is lit, but she hasn't checked it in centuries. Historians still argue whether Demeter's original role was strictly agricultural, or if she started as something deeper, perhaps a chthonic goddess of the underworld later sanitized for broader appeal. Either way, here she is now patron of farming fertility, and unofficially naps. You follow her down to Earth, where the mortals bustle like ants in the heat. Unlike the gods, they're aging, struggling, sweating through olive harvests and poorly timed goat stampedes. Demeter walks among them unnoticed in disguise as an older woman with a weathered face and gold-threaded cloak. She sees their toil, their short lives. It's mildly interesting in the way watching a pot almost boil is interesting, but even among mortals, Demeter remains restless. She glides through grain fields, brushes her hand across golden stalks that bow to her touch. The wind carries the soft shuffle of wheat. It's peaceful, yes, but peace has a way of dragging boredom behind it like a sack of wet laundry. There's an old fringe theory, a strange whisper from the darker corners of myth, that Demeter's malaise wasn't laziness, it was hibernation. That gods enter long phases of withdrawal, waiting for something or someone to reawaken them. That maybe Olympus wasn't a soap opera, but a long divine nap punctuated by mortal chaos. No one really agrees on it, but you have to admit it'd explain a lot. In the distance, you hear Apollo tuning his lyre. Another impromptu concert. Demeter barely looks up. Aphrodite floats by on a scallop shell hair, immaculate, trailing rose petals. Demeter doesn't even blink. You, however, are pretty sure a petal just got stuck to your lip. Gross. you try to imagine the eternity of being needed but not wanted, worshipped but misunderstood. Mortals pray for rain, for crops, for fertility. But no one asks if the goddess herself is fulfilled. The gods don't have therapists unless you count Dionysus, and he only listens after 2 goblets of wine and 1 interpretive dance. One day, as Demeter paces through a grove of fig trees, something shifts. Not in the air, not in the ground, but in her. A tickle of curiosity, a twinge of, what longing? She doesn't know yet, but you do. It's the beginning of a story older than most ruins, one that will turn her slow-burning boredom into a worldwide system of growth and decay. And yes, it involves fruit, as these stories always weirdly do. She sits on a stone under a fig tree, pulling her cloak tighter. The sun starts to lower bleeding gold into the horizon. Her fingers absent-mindedly draw a spiral in the dust, and for the first time in 1,000 years, she wonders what it might be like to create not just grain, but life. Meanwhile, up on Olympus, someone breaks a golden goblet. Someone else bets 5 drachmas that Dionysus can't ride a flaming chariot backwards. No one notices Demeter's absence. No one asks where she's gone. And she likes it that way. You linger nearby watching as she walks through a village unnoticed. A child waves. She almost smiles. Almost. And maybe, just maybe, that tiny flicker, too small to be divine, too human to ignore, is the moment the seasons started turning. You follow Demeter as she wanders the earth, skimming the edges of vineyards and barley fields, always just outside of being seen. Her divine glow is dimmed down, cloaked in the folds of a threadbare shawl. She looks like any mortal woman, tired, sun-worn, maybe humming a tune to herself. But every step she takes leaves the earth a little richer. The wheat stalks straighten. The olive trees swell. Somewhere, a donkey starts dancing. Okay, not really, but you feel like it could happen. She wanders not out of purpose, but habit. Like a woman walking through her hometown long after everyone she knew moved away. It's beautiful, but stale. The soil is rich, the sun is kind, and the wind is generous, but none of it surprises her anymore. And for an immortal, that's the curse running out of new things to feel. You trail her to a hillside overlooking golden fields swaying gently in the wind. She sits on a rock, rubs a pinch of soil between her fingers, and sighs. Not the dramatic sigh of someone in pain, but the deep, bone-tired exhale of a being who's grown weary of perfection. It's funny, Demeter's name literally means Earth Mother, but right now she couldn't feel more disconnected from it. Historians still debate whether this maternal title came first or evolved over time, shaped by the needs of the agrarian societies who worshipped her. Was she always the bringer of grain, or did mortals simply assign her that job after realizing crops seemed to grow better near her temples? Demeter leans back, eyes closed. You can hear bees buzzing somewhere lazy and aimless like she is. She could snap her fingers and make it rain. She could summon fields of corn so big they'd put Iowa to shame. But why, for whom the gods don't care? The mortals are too busy trying not to starve. Even the trees seem to be whispering. What now? There's a certain poetry to her isolation. A goddess surrounded by life who feels none of it inside her. She walks through villages that smell like bread and smoke and livestock, and the people don't notice her, not really. They sense something maybe. A shift in the air, a bit of luck in the harvest. But they go on with their days, yelling at goats and weaving baskets. You start to notice that Demeter isn't just watching the people, she's studying them. She lingers longer near mothers with children, watches how they scold and laugh and wipe dirt from small faces. She watches girls picking herbs, boys throwing stones into rivers. old women hanging laundry while muttering about someone named Nikos. And something stirs again. Not boredom, not quite. A longing. Not for power, she already has that. Not for worship, she barely notices it. No, this is something softer, something quieter. You sit beside her as she watches a young woman tend to a garden. The girl hums as she works brushing hair from her face with muddy fingers. There's something about her, her focus, her joy, her small, ordinary determination that makes Demeter blink like she's seeing the world through different eyes. Maybe Demeter murmurs more to herself than anyone maybe what I need is someone. Now, let's not romanticize this moment. There's no magical beam of light, no choir of muses humming in the background, just a dusty road, a little patch of cucumbers, and a goddess realizing she's lonely. Fringe scholars sometimes speculate that the myths of Demeter evolved as metaphors for divine withdrawal periods, when the goddess's energy was absent from the earth, explaining droughts or harsh winters. But what if those stories were less about weather and more about mood? And now, sitting on that hillside, Demeter is ready for a new season in her own life. The idea of creating a child doesn't come in a thunderbolt. It arrives slowly like a dandelion seed landing softly on soil. She wants someone to walk beside her, not as a worshiper, not as a servant, but as a companion. Someone to laugh with, to teach, to share a fig and complain about how loud Apollo plays his lyre. She doesn't tell anyone. Not yet. The other gods would just raise their eyebrows and ask awkward questions. Hera would definitely say something judgy. And Zeus, well, Zeus would probably offer to help, which is its own kind of nightmare. So Demeter begins preparing in silence. She wanders to sacred groves, touches the oldest olive trees, collects river stones smoothed by time. She sings to the wind soft lullabies that carry on the breeze, bending grass and rippling streams. The earth listens. Something stirs. And one morning, just as the sun crests the Aegean, something changes. You see her cradle something not with arms, but with her presence. A glow gathers around her, not the harsh kind the other gods flaunt, but a soft, golden light. Warm like a hearth, quiet like a hidden root. She has created Persephone, not with fire and lightning, not through war or conquest, but through longing and love. The girl is not like the other gods, she's younger, gentler with laughter that tastes like spring. Her hair catches sunlight like woven straw. Her eyes carry the mischief of someone who hasn't yet known sorrow. Demeter doesn't cry. She just breathes deeply like she finally remembers how. Persephone is curious and fast and talks too much about frogs. She names ants and sings to bees, and once tried to climb a laurel tree just to see if it had dreams. The world responds. Flowers bloom earlier. Rivers run clearer. Mortals start to whisper of a golden age, a time when crops grew without fail, when women felt powerful, and children danced in circles without a care. Demeter walks beside her daughter in every field, points out each seed and sprout. She teaches her which roots are healing and which mushrooms will send you to meet your ancestors a bit too early. Together they make the world beautiful. But even now, something hums in the distance. A warning. A shadow that doesn't yet have a name. For now, though, the earth is golden. Persephone laughs, and Demeter finally has someone to share her eternity with. You're in the middle of a wildflower meadow now. Sunlight pouring in lazy shafts through the trees. Bees hovering like indecisive little helicopters. And Persephone is chasing a butterfly like it owes her money. Demeter watches from a flat rock nearby her sandals, off toes in the grass. She's smiling in that quiet, all-is-well kind of way. You've never seen her so grounded. Motherhood suits her, even if it came not from Olympus fanfare, but from personal boredom and soft determination. But, as with all children, Persephone doesn't stay small. She's aging still divine sure, but growing in spirit and strength. And Demeter is feeling things she hasn't had to deal with in a long time, like anxiety and possessiveness, and a weird kind of heartburn that might just be her eternal nerves. Persephone wants to explore. She wants to meet other gods. She wants to see what a volcano looks like from the inside, not recommended, and Demeter is not handling it well. You trail behind them as Demeter tries to keep things light. She suggests educational things. Why don't we go study potato varietals in Thessaly? Or wouldn't you rather spend time cataloging medicinal herbs? Persephone predictably wants to go to Olympus and hang out with Artemis and maybe try on some of Aphrodite's lip gloss. Persephone's not just any daughter, she's the daughter of the goddess of growth. So, naturally, she's bursting with energy and opinions. She wants to try everything know, everything dance until the stars fade, and ask the kind of questions that make even ancient deities wince. There's this fringe tale, likely apocryphal, but delightfully awkward, where Persephone once asked Hephaestus if he could make her a pair of fireproof shoes. Why? So I can walk in lava and not feel limited by traditional footwear. Classic teen. Historians still argue whether the myth of Persephone was a later addition to Demeter's story, or if she was always intended as part of the cycle from the start. Either way, she becomes the beating heart of what comes next. You see, Demeter tried to hold her daughter's hand a little tighter. You see Persephone gently tug away. It's not rebellion, it's just growing up. One morning, Persephone announces she's going on a solo walk, just around the hills. Not far. Totally safe. And Demeter tries to act cool. Of course, she says. Just stay where the grass is green, avoid the caves. And if you see any god riding a black chariot, don't accept rides offerings or snacks, which in Greek myth is basically saying, please do exactly this. You trail Persephone now just a little ahead of Demeter's awareness. The girl hums as she walks gathering flowers in a woven basket, turning every third step into a little twirl. She's not running away, she's just stretching her wings, and that's when things take a hard turn into Gothic territory. The earth beneath her quivers. Birds scatter. A low rumble pulses up through the ground. And before Persephone can even drop her flowers, the soil cracks open. Now, most versions of this tale gloss over the moment. But not tonight, because you're there, and it's terrifying. The sky dims. A chasm splits wide enough to swallow a house. Out of it charges Hades, dark robes, billowing eyes shadowed crown askew like he woke up 5 minutes ago and still has underworld bedhead. He's riding a black chariot pulled by immortal skeletal horses that look like they were raised on volcanic ash and sarcasm. He grabs Persephone, not cruelly, not violently, but firmly, like someone who's been waiting a long time for a very specific opportunity. Persephone doesn't scream. Not at first. She's too stunned. The chariot vanishes into the earth, and the crack seals up like it was never there. You stand in the field, surrounded by crushed flowers and disturbed earth. And Demeter knows. She feels it the way mothers feel sudden silence. She stands. The air stills. Somewhere clouds begin to form. She races to the meadow. Her daughter's basket lies in the grass, the stems still warm. The scent of blossoms lingers like an echo. And Demeter breaks. Not in the theatrical Greek tragedy way. There's no hair-pulling or scream that echoes across mountaintops. No, she just stops moving, stops growing. The divine engine that has kept the world blooming stalls. There's an old inscription found near Eleusis carved into a fragment of stone. When the daughter vanished, the mother turned her face from us. Scholars debate if it's literal or poetic. Tonight, you know it's both. Demeter wanders. She refuses Olympus, refuses nectar, refuses to make the barley rise or the figs swell. Crops shrivel. Rivers run low. Animals sense the shift and flee to the forests. She becomes the ghost of herself, wandering in mortal disguise, muttering Persephone's name under her breath like a prayer, or maybe a curse. The world starts to panic. Mortals starve. Offerings burn unanswered. The other gods start avoiding her because nothing says awkward divine brunch like a goddess of plenty, who shows up looking like she's been crying for 6 months. You walk beside her as she visits every mountain, every temple, every grove her daughter might have loved. She doesn't eat, she doesn't sleep. Her hair turns from gold to ash. Fields once kissed by her touch become barren. Still, no one speaks her name on Olympus. But down in the underworld, Persephone sits beside Hades, wide-eyed quiet. She's not harmed. Hades may be the king of the dead, but he's weirdly polite for a guy who just committed celestial kidnapping. You see her glance toward the ceiling of the cavernous palace where roots dangle like veins. She reaches toward them. Somewhere far above Demeter does the same. A silent echo travels between them. The world holds its breath. You follow Demeter now as she descends from her wanderings into something deeper rage mixed with grief, coated in a layer of cosmic exhaustion. She's no longer searching. She's not even hoping. She's waiting. Waiting for anyone to notice that she has stopped doing her job. Because when you're the goddess of the harvest and you go on strike, people tend to notice eventually. Crops are failing. Sheep are confused. Farmers stare at the sky like it owes them an apology. A priest in Argos sacrifices a basket of olives and gets nothing but a gust of dusty wind in return. Even the grapes wither on the vine, and if you want to know how serious that is, just imagine ancient Greeks being forced to drink water. Eventually, the whispers reach Olympus. The gods lounge in their marble halls, tossing around gossip like it's a contact sport. Hermes pops his head into Zeus's chamber with that awkward half-grin that says, "Please don't shoot the messenger." "Hey, Hermes says, casually flipping a coin. So, Demeter's not Demetering anymore. Zeus sighs. Not out of concern, mind you. This is the sigh of a dad who just realized someone unplugged the Wi-Fi. He rubs his temples, mutters something about how women are complicated, and eventually sends Hermes down to handle it. You float alongside Hermes, who zips through the sky in his winged sandals muttering, "Why is it always me?" under his breath. He finds Demeter near a scorched field, staring into the distance like it might answer her. "Hey, Demeter," he says, landing softly. "You look radiant as ever." She turns to him slowly, eyes like dry thunderclouds. Where is she? Hermes blinks. Okay. Straight to business. Now, here's where the historical fact kicks in. Ancient Greeks actually celebrated a series of secretive rites called the Eleusinian Mysteries, centered around Demeter and Persephone. The rituals were meant to offer initiates a glimpse of hope and rebirth after death. They also involved months of fasting purification and probably a few vision-inducing substances. Fun times. Demeter, you suspect, would not have been in a mystery-celebrating mood right now. Hermes, who values his immortal hide, decides not to deliver Hades's address directly. Instead, he reports back to Zeus, who, after some divine hemming and hawing, realizes that the world is well dying. Not metaphorically, literally. No crops, no food, no mortals. And no mortals means no sacrifices. And no sacrifices means no power. And that gets Zeus moving. He calls for a full divine council, and the gods arrive like reality show contestants showing up for a reunion episode. Poseidon's still damp, Athena brings scrolls, Aphrodite is suspiciously overdressed. Dionysus shows up with a jug of something no one identifies. Demeter arrives last, silent, pale, and barefoot. The room stills. "Where is my daughter?" she asks. No preamble, no small talk. Zeus tries diplomacy. "Sister, please, this is a family matter." She raises a hand, the ground trembles. A nearby olive tree instantly dies. The council blinks. Now, according to some sources, Zeus actually allowed Hades to take Persephone as a way to forge alliances and keep things tidy. But historians still argue whether this was a calculated political move or just the king of gods being lazy with paperwork. Either way, Zeus sends Hermes to the underworld. Again. You follow the messenger god as he dives into the gloom, the temperature dropping with each wing beat. The air down here tastes like cold iron and unsaid truths. The river Styx murmurs below its currents filled with broken promises and forgotten names. Hermes lands outside Hades's palace, knocks politely, and is greeted by a servant with eye sockets that glow faintly blue. "Delivery from Olympus," Hermes says, and is ushered inside. Persephone sits beside Hades, neither afraid nor exactly comfortable. She's wearing a crown of obsidian, her eyes a little darker than before. Not because she's changed yet, but because the underworld has a way of seeping into your bones like damp. Hermes clears his throat. Zeus says it's time to go home. Hades leans forward, hands steepled. She is home. Persephone flinches. Hermes gestures vaguely. Demeter's killing the world. Zeus is cranky. I'm tired. Let's just not trigger a divine apocalypse, okay? Hades sighs. Fine. But ask her if she's eaten anything. Persephone looks up. I had a few pomegranate seeds. I was hungry. Hermes goes very still. How many? She holds up a hand. 6. And there it is. You see, the ancient belief was that if you ate food from the underworld, it bound you to it. The number of seeds determines how long you must stay. It's a rule, not a punishment. Just divine law with fruit-based clauses. Hermes groans. Well, this just got complicated. Back on Earth, Demeter waits. The world is brown and dry and whispering toward extinction. The other gods are watching, half expecting her to explode into a vengeful weather event. Hermes returns Persephone beside him. Demeter sees her daughter, and for a moment everything else, time, grief, divine protocol, just stops. She runs to her wraps, her in arms that haven't felt warmth in months. They don't speak. They just exist in the same space again. Then Zeus clears his throat. She ate underworld food, he says. 6 seeds. So, Demeter stiffens. So she must return. 6 months of the year. Demeter's face hardens, but Persephone takes her hand. It's okay, Persephone says softly. I can do this. And Demeter slowly, painfully agrees. From that compromise, something unexpected blooms. Seasons. When Persephone is above ground, Demeter rejoices. The world flowers. Wheat sings. Bees throw spontaneous festivals. When Persephone returns below, Demeter grieves. The earth goes quiet. Trees sleep. The world breathes in. And that's how boredom and heartbreak created the rhythm we now call time. A goddess wanted something new, found someone to love. and when that someone was taken, she shaped all life around her grief. You glance at the trees around you. Some are green, some are bare. Somewhere underground, a girl traces roots with her fingers and waits for spring. Now you're drifting over a slowly turning world, watching as the seasons begin to tick like a great clock. It's not sudden, it takes years for mortals to understand what's happening. One generation blames the gods for their dying crops. The next generation learns to plant in rhythm with the sky. They call it spring, summer, autumn, winter. All because Demeter's joy and sorrow have become nature's metronome. You settle beside her again. She's kneeling in a sun-warmed grove, pressing her hands into the soil. Persephone has just returned from the underworld. The grass perks up. Buds bloom. The air smells like citrus and honey, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear the ground purring. Demeter doesn't say much anymore. She doesn't have to. The world speaks for her. Every leaf that uncurls is a love letter. Every snowfall is her silence. But let's rewind a little, because not everyone on Olympus was thrilled with how this all went down. In fact, several of the gods, especially the ones who don't get much screen time, began to grumble. They didn't understand why Demeter was allowed to hold the entire mortal world hostage for the sake of one daughter. Why not just make another kid Ares, allegedly muttered at one point. Aphrodite dumped her wine on his head. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. A minor cult in Arcadia once claimed that Demeter had a second child during her time in hiding a horse-headed goddess named Despoina. The myths are shadowy, and no one really agrees on her origin. Some say she was a forgotten twin of Persephone. Others whisper she was born from pure rage. Scholars still argue whether Despoina was ever meant to be part of the main myth, or if she was a local legend that galloped in from the side. Anyway, while mortals adjusted to seasons with blankets and rituals, Demeter adjusted to something trickier, letting go. You see her learning not to hover, not to send unsolicited dream messages to Persephone at 2 a.m., just checking in, sweetie. Did you remember to hex-proof your underworld room? She tries hobbies, olive oil infusions, collecting cloud shapes. For a while, she even mentors some mortal herbalists in Sicily. But it's never quite the same. Every year, when the time comes, she walks with Persephone to the edge of a quiet cave where the shadows thicken. They hold hands. They don't cry anymore. They just pause. And Persephone always says the same thing: I'll be back soon. Don't freeze the world too hard this time. Demeter manages a smile. No promises. And then she waits. While she waits, the other gods go back to business as usual. Mortals live and die. Empires rise and fall. Demeter just continues a constant presence like gravity, or that one song stuck in your head. But even now, after all this time, there are days she drifts back to that meadow, the one where Persephone vanished. She presses her palm to the ground and listens. Sometimes she swears she hears laughter beneath the soil. Now, here's your historical fact in ancient Greece. Farmers would actually bury piglets in the ground during the Thesmophoria, a festival to honor Demeter and Persephone. Weird. Yes. Effective, allegedly. The idea was that fertility came from sacrifice, and the rotten remains sorry would bless the coming crops. You can almost hear Demeter's voice in that tradition. Everything that dies makes something grow. Still, Demeter isn't just about rebirth. She has her own edges. When the mortals stop honoring her, when temples fall into ruin, when prayers are replaced with coins and politics, she notices. She doesn't lash out. She just withdraws. Quietly. coldly. That's the thing with Demeter. She doesn't need thunder or lightning. She can disappear, and when she disappears, everything else does too. 1 century, a kingdom decides they're above the gods. They laugh at rituals, chop down sacred groves, build a marble shopping center over a sanctuary. Winter comes early, lingers too long. They rebuild the temple. But despite her power, Demeter is also unusually mortal in temperament. She holds grudges like heirlooms. She has favorites. She visits kind farmers in dreams. Once a fisherman swears she appeared to him as an old woman and taught him how to grow melons in the sand. He became a legend, then a local feast day. You travel with her now across hills and islands. She walks softly, half forgotten in some places, beloved in others. Children leave honey cakes for her at doorsteps. Old women whisper her name during childbirth. Bakers thank her with the first slice of bread. And through it all, she never forgets that once, long ago, she was just a bored goddess who asked for something more. It's strange, isn't it? The goddess of the harvest isn't famous for war or love or mischief. Her power isn't loud, but it's everywhere. It's in the way flowers know when to bloom. It's in your morning toast. It's in the way the air smells like possibility when winter finally breaks. Demeter built the rhythm of time not with clocks or calendars, but with her heart. And though the world changes, machines rise, cities sprawl, humans forget her name, she's still there, beneath the pavement, inside every seed, behind every raindrop, waiting, watching. And when Persephone comes home, she'll dance again, because no matter how divine she is, no matter how ancient and endless Demeter is, still just a mom who misses her kid. You trail Demeter now into quieter places, those long sleepy years where things just hum along. Persephone comes and goes, and the seasons keep ticking. Mortals build calendars, invent holidays, roast chestnuts, and complain about allergies. They name months after emperors, but the rhythm, Demeter's rhythm, still underpins it all. It's funny how once you stop looking for divine intervention, you start missing the signs. Like the way wheat bends toward the east during planting season. Or how certain birds only sing just before Persephone returns to the surface. You've learned to feel the shift yourself, haven't you? The whisper of spring, like someone turning a key in the dark. Still, even with the world in balance, boredom creeps in again. Not the bored but blessed kind that started this myth, but a deeper, itchier sort. The is this it variety. So Demeter wanders. She takes to disguises again, popping up in mortal stories under different names. She's Doso, the silent nanny in Eleusis. She's the veiled woman by the barley fields in Crete. She's even at one point mistaken for a hermit witch who curses anyone who doesn't offer her goat cheese. That last one might not have been an accident. And here's a juicy historical morsel in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, a sort of divine fanfic from around the 7th century BCE. Demeter does indeed walk among mortals in disguise. She accepts a job as a nursemaid, tries to make the baby immortal by roasting him in the fire, as one does, and gets caught. The mortal mother screams. Demeter drops, the baby gently reveals her true form in a burst of golden radiance and says, "You messed up, but I'm still going to build a temple here." Iconic. You follow her to Eleusis now, where the temple becomes a full-on sacred precinct. Massive stone steps, marble altars, strange echoing chambers for ritual chants and secret initiations. The Eleusinian mysteries grow into one of the most famous cults in the ancient world, with people traveling for miles just to walk through the holy sequence of fasting, purifying, and apparently experiencing the divine. But here's where things get mysterious, like capital M mysterious. No one actually wrote down what happened in the final rites of the Eleusinian mysteries. We know the general structure: fasting a procession, drinking a special brew called kykeon, and then something life-changing in the dark hall of Telesterion. But what actually happened in there? That's still hotly debated. Historians still argue whether it was a psychedelic vision, a dramatic reenactment of Persephone's return, or just really powerful incense. Demeter, of course, never tells. She lingers in Eleusis long after the rituals fade into legend. Even when the Romans come stomping in with their polished sandals and surplus gods, they still make room for her. They call her Ceres, build new temples, keep the grain flowing. In fact, here's a fun little side note: the modern word cereal comes from Ceres. So yes, the next time you eat a bowl of cornflakes, you are participating, however vaguely, in a 1,000-year-old agricultural ritual. Snap, crackle blessings. But Demeter doesn't just stay in temples. She walks through vineyards in Gaul, whispers to spice merchants in Alexandria, and even allegedly appears in a Byzantine vision as a golden wheat maiden. Fringe scholars have argued that she never really vanished. She just changed costumes. And yet, for all this movement, she's still waiting. Still tethered to Persephone's cycle. Each goodbye is a little softer now. Each return a little brighter. One year, Persephone brings her a gift from the underworld, a tiny sapling grown from charred soil. It blooms black flowers with pale silver veins. Demeter plants it near her temple, and it's said to only blossom when both of them are together. You walk with her under its twisted branches now, where shadows flicker but never quite feel threatening. The leaves shimmer like secrets. Even the other gods start to notice her mood shifts. Apollo calls it weather instability. Hera, with a sigh, calls it classic Demeter. Only Hestia, goddess of the hearth, really gets it. She visits sometimes, bringing roasted chestnuts and silence. They don't talk much. They don't need to. One is fire. The other is earth. Both are tired of being underestimated. Oh, and here's your fringe detail of the night. There was once a bizarre little belief in rural Thessaly that if you baked bread during Persephone's descent, it would always burn no matter the oven. Locals would just shrug, eat olives, and say, "Demeter's moody again." And she is, but in that ancient, seasonal, cyclical way. Not unstable, just emotionally structured, like a well-written tragedy with bonus flowers. You catch her now sitting beside a mortal child, teaching her how to separate wheat from chaff. The girl giggles, scattering husks into the wind. Demeter smiles, brushes dirt from the child's cheek. This is what she chooses now. Small moments, passing wisdom. A kind word that ripens into harvest a generation later. It's not flashy. No lightning bolts or epic love affairs. But somehow you realize it matters more. Because the world spins not on wars or gods, but on the quiet persistence of those who keep planting seeds, even when the sky looks uncertain. And that's what Demeter does. Every day, every season, waiting for spring, and knowing it will come. You find yourself following Demeter through a garden that isn't quite a garden. It's part wild, part ruined, part sacred, a place forgotten by time but tended by memory. Ancient stone columns lean like tired sentinels half swallowed by vines. Birds flit between fig trees, and somewhere a stream murmurs secrets you'll never quite catch. She doesn't talk as much these days, not out loud, but the way she moves tracing patterns in the soil with her fingertip, listening to the wind, tells you everything. She's not bored anymore. She's not furious. She's something else, resigned, but not defeated. Resignation, after all, is just acceptance with a good night's sleep. This is when the mortals start to shift again. Temples to Demeter and Persephone are still standing, but attendance dwindles. Some cities forget the right words for the harvest chants. Others repurpose sacred groves into goat pens. Honestly, not a great look. Still, every now and then, someone remembers. A lone priest in Thebes who keeps the hearth burning. A mother in Ephesus who buries a handful of barley with her stillborn child, whispering Demeter's name. A farmer in Delphi who insists on pouring the first press of olive oil into the roots of an old pine tree, because it's what my grandmother did. And Demeter, though quieter, is always listening. Here's your historical fact for this round. In late antiquity, even as Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, rural areas still clung to older rites. The term pagan actually comes from paganus, meaning country dweller. Basically, city folk moved on, but Demeter's spirit lived on in the rhythms of planting and reaping. A new god may promise salvation, but Demeter gave you dinner. As belief systems shift, Demeter adapts. She slips out of the pantheon spotlight and becomes a kind of mythic wallpaper, always there, quietly supporting everything while other deities shout over each other. Scholars still argue whether she was ever truly worshipped as herself in later periods, or whether she became a metaphor for nature's cycles. One fringe theory even suggests she inspired early agrarian saints, hiding behind their miracles like a shy stage mom. In Sicily, for instance, tales persist of a veiled woman who teaches locals how to predict the rains by listening to the owls. No lightning bolts, no monstrous trials, just patient, earthy wisdom. That's classic Demeter. She stops one afternoon by a weathered stone marker. The carving is long faded. A few daisies grow at its base, defiantly bright. Demeter kneels and brushes the petals with 2 fingers. They remembered, she murmurs more to herself than to you. It hits you then how long she's been waiting, not just for Persephone each year, but for people to remember why she matters. For someone to see the root, not just the flower. There's a subtle joke in there. Something about how humans get obsessed with fruit, with bloom, with spectacle, and forget that everything depends on what's buried. But Demeter, goddess of what lies beneath, never forgets. And sometimes she sends reminders. Here's a quirky tidbit. During a drought in the Peloponnesus in the 4th century BCE, records claim that a woman priest dreamed of Demeter angrily shaking a jar of dry beans. The next day it rained. The locals held a bean festival for a decade after that, just in case. Demeter's moods are complex like that. Not throw a thunderbolt rage. More like, fine, let's see you grow anything without me passive aggression. And it works. She's not flashy, but she's thorough. That's why you notice she's always doing. Even when the gods go idle. Even when Zeus naps on a cumulus or Ares picks a fight with a mirror, Demeter is checking root health, adjusting soil acidity, listening for signs of early blight. She's a goddess and a gardener, and both jobs require endless patience. One time you watch her resurrect a nearly dead orchard, not with magic but with compost mulch and whispered encouragement. It takes 5 years. The peaches are worth it. You walk with her through coastal fields next where fishermen pray to Poseidon, but wives still scatter grain into the surf for the Earth Mother. No one uses her name anymore, but they hum her melodies. And Demeter. She just smiles. She's learned not to need the fanfare. She doesn't require a golden temple or 100 hymns. She just wants the land to flourish, wants Persephone to return, wants the cycle to keep spinning soft and sure. But then there's a bump in the rhythm. 1 year the balance feels off. Persephone's return is late. The first buds hesitate. The birds are confused. Even the bees seem unsure. Demeter waits at the cave entrance. No sign of her daughter. No whisper from the underworld. Just silence. And suddenly the world notices. Crops hesitate. Animals delay breeding. Even mortal hearts beat a little slower. Something's missing. Not wrong, just missing. You can almost taste it in the air, the absence of return, the ache of unfinished ritual. This isn't the kind of crisis Demeter can fix with compost or fasting or a mystery rite. She doesn't panic. She listens. She goes to the underworld herself, not storming in with wrath, just walking calm and deliberate into the shadows. Because sometimes a mother doesn't wait. Sometimes she finds the problem herself, and as you follow her into that cool, echoing dark, the soil damp beneath your feet, and the ceiling dripping with minerals, you wonder what happens when the cycle breaks, and what will Demeter do to restore it. You step carefully behind Demeter, now following her into the hush of the underworld. The air grows dense, like the moment just before a thunderstorm, or maybe like the breath you hold when you don't yet know if everything's about to go wrong. No trumpets, no clash of drama. Just her steady footsteps against the obsidian ground. You realize how different she is from the other gods. No theatrics, no divine spotlight. Just presence. A quiet force wrapped in rust-colored robes, smelling faintly of tilled soil and rain-soaked roots. She doesn't ask permission to enter, doesn't bow to Hades or knock politely. She simply is, and the underworld makes space. Even the Furies, those terrifying enforcers of vengeance, pause. They watch her like nervous students who forgot their homework. You remember this isn't her first descent. She's been here before. First, when she clawed through it in grief to find her daughter. Then again and again for every mortal funeral she felt tug at her heart. She doesn't belong here, not exactly, but she's not unwelcome either. She's that rare visitor who knows how to tread softly on someone else's grief. But something's wrong. She can feel it. The fields of asphodel are too still. The whispers of the dead too quiet. Even the river Lethe, where souls forget their former lives, seems hesitant, rippling, as though unsure of what memories to carry away. And Persephone nowhere. You pass by empty thrones, abandoned altars, discarded garlands. Little hints that Persephone was here. But now her presence has thinned out like morning fog. Even Hades looks confused. He's not what you expect, no pitchfork, no evil smirk. Just a weary god with coal-black eyes and a furrowed brow muttering to himself as he paces. He doesn't seem cruel, just overwhelmed. Like someone who inherited a job no one wants and can't quite quit. She was supposed to be here, he tells Demeter. She left when the gate opened, but never came through. Demeter doesn't shout, doesn't accuse. She just narrows her eyes and tilts her head like she's listening to the roots beneath the world. Here's your historical detail for the night in ancient Greek cosmology. The underworld wasn't always a place of punishment. It was more like a cosmic filing cabinet. Souls were sorted, judged, and stored each according to the life they'd lived. Some were reborn. Some lingered. Some became shadows of stories forgotten. But even in this orderly afterlife, anomalies occurred. Tales tell of souls that slipped away, of spirits who defied the cycle, and of doors that opened when they shouldn't. And here comes your quirky tidbit. One obscure Orphic hymn from the 3rd century BCE references a twilight grove between the world of the living and the dead, a space where lost gods and mortals could wander if they strayed too far from their paths. Most scholars dismiss it as poetic nonsense. Demeter doesn't. She sets off toward the edge of the underworld, past the rivers beyond the caves into that strange in-between. You follow. This place doesn't obey normal rules. You walk for hours and get nowhere. Or maybe for seconds and find yourself years ahead. Time hiccups here. And there, under a canopy of shimmering shadow leaves, you see her. Persephone. But not as she was. Her hair floats around her like seaweed in slow water. Her eyes glow not gold, but something older, like the color of fossilized sap. She turns toward Demeter, and her expression is full of both recognition and something more unsettling detachment. She doesn't run to her, doesn't cry out, just says, "I forgot the way back." That hits you. It lands heavy like a missed heartbeat. Demeter moves forward, careful but unwavering. She kneels before her daughter and reaches out. No magic, no divine compulsion, just the oldest bond there is. And slowly, achingly, Persephone takes her hand. Scholars still argue whether this part of the myth ever existed in any official canon. Some believe it's a metaphor for mental illness, for losing yourself in grief or power. Others insist it reflects a once-lost seasonal myth, an extra winter, a gap in the natural rhythm when the world stopped spinning quite right. Whatever it is, you're witnessing the repair of it now. The slow rerouting. Because here's the secret: Demeter always knew not everything that breaks has to stay broken. But it does need patience, and dirt under your nails, and someone who keeps showing up. Together they walk back. Persephone's form stabilizes, her eyes warm, her voice returns. The path reshapes beneath their steps. Even the Lethe flows with a new vigor, as if grateful for a story it didn't have to forget. And, as they rise from the underworld, something shifts in the air above. The soil loosens. Buds peek from branches. Animals stir in their dens. The first true spring in years begins not calendar spring, but emotional spring. The kind that melts frost you didn't know had settled inside you. Demeter doesn't celebrate with a feast. She simply digs her fingers into the warming earth and breathes. You stand beside her in a sunbeam that feels earned. There's a fresh silence between her and Persephone. Not distance peace, the kind of quiet that happens when no more explaining is needed. They sit together beneath an olive tree, shoulders touching. The breeze smells like time and new beginnings. And now the cycle resumes. But not the same as before. Better. You watch the light return to the world, not as a dramatic sunrise, but as something more intimate, like the warmth that creeps into your toes after sitting too close to the fire. The ground breathes again. Trees stretch. Rivers start humming old lullabies. Everything exhales at once. Demeter walks slowly, her fingertips brushing stalks of young wheat that weren't there yesterday. You notice her shoulders have dropped a little. That edge of worry, the tight grip of control, has eased. Not vanished, she's still Demeter after all, but loosened. Like a gardener trusting the seeds to do their thing. Persephone stays close. This time, there's no rush back to Olympus, no formal pronouncements, just a quiet understanding. They walk together occasionally, stopping to kneel to feel the earth to check the buds. It's not mother and daughter anymore. It's something more like co-creators of rhythm. You might think the story ends here, Sunshine Reunion cue. The happy myth credits. But seasons don't stop, and neither does Demeter. Here's your historical fact of the night in ancient Eleusis, just outside Athens. There was a sacred site where the Eleusinian mysteries took place. It was one of the most important religious events in the ancient world, held every year in Demeter's honor. People traveled from all over Greece to be initiated into these secrets. What exactly happened there? Still unknown. Seriously, the initiates were sworn to secrecy, and historians still argue whether it involved symbolic death psychedelic barley drinks or a particularly intense interpretive dance. But what we do know is that it all centered on Demeter Persephone and the cycle of return. And that to the Greeks wasn't just agricultural, it was personal. If the goddess of grain could survive loss, boredom, grief, and winter, so could they. And so can you, even if your winter doesn't involve pomegranate seeds and shadow realms. Maybe just deadlines and complicated group texts the metaphor holds. Now, here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some scholars believe the Eleusinian mysteries used kykeon, a sacred drink made of barley and mint, which may have been mildly hallucinogenic. In other words, a divine smoothie that helped initiates feel a little closer to the gods, or at least forget how long the ceremony was. Imagine Demeter, with her dirt-streaked robe and gentle sarcasm, offering you a cup of grainy mint slush and whispering, "Drink this and you'll understand." Kind of feels like the spiritual version of a green juice cleanse, but with better after effects. The fields around you are buzzing now. Bees return not frantically, but with purpose. They hover over anemones and crocus's flowers tied forever to Persephone's myth. And this time they don't wither. They bloom. And so does something in you. Demeter points to a tree, an almond early blooming, and tells you the story of Phyllis and Demophoon, a sad tale that ends with a woman turning into a tree out of grief. But she doesn't tell it like a tragedy. She smiles a little. Becoming something that feeds others isn't the worst ending, she says. That's the thing with Demeter. She doesn't erase sadness. She composts it, turns it into something new. Every heartbreak, every long winter becomes food for spring. Persephone, meanwhile, is relearning the surface world. Her gait is slower here. Her eyes adjust. She reaches down to scoop a handful of wildflowers and presses them to her face, inhaling like someone who hasn't had fresh air in decades. Demeter doesn't hover. That's new. It takes effort, you can tell. But she's learned the delicate art of letting go without letting disappear, of giving space while still being rooted nearby. It's a skill most gods never master. Frankly, most people don't either. The world shifts into rhythm again. Not perfect, not symmetrical, but functional. A little messy, a little uneven, like most of the things worth holding on to. Here's something scholars love to debate. Was Demeter's story always meant to explain the seasons, or did it evolve that way over time? Some think the myth came after the farming. Once the Greeks noticed that nothing grew, when the goddess grieved, the story retrofitted itself. Others believe it came first. The myth carved the agricultural calendar like a divine instruction manual. Either way, the connection between emotion and nature became inseparable. Demeter weeps, the world wilts. She laughs, the barley blooms. There's power in that, because it means your sadness doesn't go unnoticed by the universe. That even your boredom, your stillness, your waiting, all of it has weight and purpose. You sit now under a fig tree, the breeze shifting just enough to remind you you're still alive, still part of the cycle. Demeter walks by and drops a fig in your lap. It's perfectly ripe, warm from the sun. "You're doing okay," she says casually, like it's not one of the most comforting things you've heard in years. You take a bite. Sweet. messy, real, and suddenly you understand. Not everything is about gods or rituals or symbolic seeds. Sometimes it's just about remembering that seasons change, that what feels like forever winter isn't. And even when it gets boring, even when you lose track of how long you've been waiting, the wheel turns. Always. And Demeter. She's still out there, in every bloom, every sigh of wind in the wheat, every fig dropped just when you needed it. You wake up to the soft hum of a late spring morning, that peculiar mixture of warmth and crispness that signals the end of waiting and the beginning of something tentative. Demeter's world is waking up with you. Fields stretch into rolling waves of green, and somewhere in the distance a dog barks lazily. It's the kind of morning that smells like possibility, but also like laundry day, mundane, steady, reassuring. Persephone is nearby, tending to a cluster of wildflowers, her fingers gentle as she adjusts their petals. You notice how her presence has changed, less distant shadow queen and more vibrant breath of fresh air. She hums a tune that sounds like the first notes of a long-lost song, and for a moment the weight of winter feels like a distant memory. The two goddesses no longer just represent myth. They're rhythms you feel in the soil beneath your feet, in the slow awakening of life all around. This transition marks a turning point, a shift from stillness to growth, from boredom to productivity. Demeter, once trapped in her solitude and sorrow, now moves with renewed purpose. She teaches you something essential, that boredom isn't just a void. It's a space filled with quiet potential. Here's your historical nugget. Ancient Greek farmers had festivals like Thesmophoria, held in Demeter's honor, where women would celebrate fertility, the sowing of seeds, and the promise of the harvest. It wasn't just a party. It was a communal acknowledgement that life moves in cycles, and that patience is as vital as toil. And speaking of patience, here's a quirky tidbit. During Thesmophoria, women would secretly exchange little gifts, often symbolic or edible, meant to foster fertility and good harvests. Apparently, ancient Greek fertility rituals had their own version of Secret Santa. Historians still debate whether these practices were deeply spiritual or more like ancient social networking events. Either way, it's proof that even goddesses appreciate a little camaraderie. You wander with Demeter to a small village where farmers are beginning to plant their crops again. The air is filled with the scent of freshly turned earth and hopeful chatter. Children chase after chickens, and elders lean on wooden staffs, watching and nodding as if approving the return of life's slow dance. Demeter watches too, but her eyes hold a deeper knowledge, one that sees the struggles beneath the surface, the years of hardship, the fears of failed harvests. She knows the world is fragile, but she also knows it is resilient. Persephone steps forward and joins the villagers, offering laughter and lightness. She talks about the future, about seasons yet to come, planting the seeds of optimism in the hearts of those who had almost forgotten hope. You realize this myth isn't just about gods or seasons. It's about you, your boredom, your losses, your quiet waits, and your restless hopes. It's about how life keeps moving even when you want to stop. And Demeter, with all her earthy patience and quiet strength, is the embodiment of that movement. You take a deep breath filled with the scent of new growth and feel the steady heartbeat of the earth beneath you. The seasons are back, and so are you. You find yourself tracing the path of a single grain of wheat, watching it grow from a fragile shoot into a golden stalk swaying in the breeze. It's almost hypnotic. That slow, steady change that no one seems to notice until it's too obvious to ignore. you realize how much of life feels like that quiet, repetitive kind of boring, until suddenly it's not. Demeter's story is the ultimate testament to that slow burn. She went from endless waiting to the powerful force behind every harvest. And you quietly are learning to see the magic in the mundane. There's a history lesson tucked in here. Wheat was the backbone of ancient Greek agriculture, and its cultivation was revolutionary, helping societies transition from nomadic to settled life. That shift transformed everything: food security, population growth, even the rise of cities. The fact that a myth about a goddess could carry the weight of such a huge human leap shows how stories shape reality. And speaking of shaping, here's a quirky fact: some ancient Greek farmers used crocodile dung as sunscreen. Yes, really. It might have been gross, but it protected their skin under the blazing sun. You probably won't survive this part of history without a cringe, but it's a reminder. Sometimes survival means embracing the weird. Back to Demeter. She watches over the wheat fields with an almost fierce tenderness, like a mother worrying about her kids on their first day of school. She knows every stalk, every leaf. The cycle isn't just about planting and harvesting. It's about care, attention, and respect for the slow work. Persephone, on the other hand, is learning how to balance. She flits between worlds: the bright surface where plants grow and the deep shadows of the underworld. She represents the tension between light and dark, joy, and grief, boredom, and excitement. Historians still argue whether Persephone was originally a chthonic fertility goddess, or if her role as Hades' queen was a later addition to the myth. This debate matters because it influences how we interpret her seasonal journey. Was it always about death and rebirth, or did it evolve from earlier earth-based worship? You watch as Persephone plants a pomegranate seed in a patch of earth. It's small, delicate, and seems ordinary until you remember the myth's cruel twist: how that seed bound her to the underworld for part of each year. The pomegranate becomes a symbol of that eternal cycle, the balance between freedom and duty, boredom and passion. It reminds you that life's constraints don't have to be prisons. Sometimes they are the frames that give shape to the picture. Demeter smiles softly as she sees Persephone's planting. It's a quiet moment, but it feels like the turning point. Like the beginning of a new kind of rule, not one of absence or control, but of partnership. And you realize something else: myths aren't just stories. They're mirrors reflecting your own struggles, your own cycles. When you're stuck, when you feel bored or lost, you're just in the waiting part of the myth, the underground winter that must pass. The seasons turn, and so will you. The wheat will grow again. And somewhere in the dirt beneath the pomegranate seed, something unexpected is always waiting to sprout. You stand on the edge of the horizon, where the last light of day mingles with the coming dusk, feeling the quiet pulse of the earth beneath your feet. The seasons, Demeter's gift and burden, ripple outward like gentle waves, touching everything in their reach. You're beginning to grasp how this myth, with its slow turns and quiet grief, shapes the very breath of the world. Demeter's hands are no longer clenched in sorrow, but steady and sure, guiding the cycles with care. Persephone walks beside her, a bridge between the light above and the shadow below. Together, they embody a balance you didn't realize you were craving: the dance between waiting and action, boredom and change. It's a good reminder that life isn't about dramatic peaks all the time. Sometimes it's the quiet edges that hold the most meaning. Like the moment you realize the stars don't just twinkle, they blink in rhythm with the universe's slow, steady heartbeat. Here's a historical nugget: the Greeks viewed seasons not just as weather changes, but as divine communications. Festivals, rituals, and agricultural practices were all ways to honor and interpret the gods' moods. The cycles of Demeter and Persephone were mapped onto the calendar itself, influencing everything from planting to marriage. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some ancient Greeks believed that the soil contained the souls of their ancestors, making farming a deeply spiritual act. Imagine that each seed you plant is a conversation with the past. Historians still argue about how literal this belief was, but the idea adds a whole new layer of depth to Demeter's care for the earth. You watch as a group of villagers harvest barley, their movements slow but purposeful, like a dance passed down through generations. Demeter smiles quietly. She knows this work is sacred, not just because it feeds the body, but because it connects people to the cycle of life and death, boredom and renewal. Persephone leans down to pick a sprig of thyme, inhaling its fragrant oil. It's a simple act, but it feels like a ritual, a silent prayer for balance. The scent lingers, wrapping around you like a warm blanket. You realize you've been holding your breath, waiting for something big, something world-shattering. But maybe the myth's real power is in the small moments, in the patience Demeter teaches, the quiet endurance, the gentle turning of the seasons. It's like waiting for your favorite song to start playing, only to find that the silence before it is just as important. And if you listen closely, you might hear it, the soft rustle of wheat, the whisper of roots growing deeper, the slow but sure heartbeat of the earth turning toward spring once more. You step carefully through rows of fresh-cut grain, the ground warm beneath your feet, the air thick with the smell of chaff and sun. The harvest is nearly complete now. Demeter's patience rewarded her boredom long behind her. But as the final sheaves are tied and gathered, there's no celebration. Not yet. There's still reverence to tend to. Demeter surveys the fields with quiet satisfaction. She's not one to cheer or dance. Her joy comes more like the relief after holding your breath too long. It's subtle, grounded. You see it in the way her shoulders lower slightly, in the almost smile she gives when a breeze scatters dust and light across the wheat like gold. Persephone walks a few paces ahead, gathering wild herbs and tying them into bundles. She knows the time is coming again, that slow slip back toward the underworld. She doesn't fear it now. But she also doesn't rush. There's a deliberate slowness in how she moves, as though soaking in every remaining drop of light. The villagers begin building a low stone altar, their hands calloused from labor but delicate with placement. Atop it, they lay offerings, honey cakes, woven wreaths, and bowls of olive oil. These aren't bribes or pleas. They're acknowledgments. Thanks. A promise to remember. And here's your history fix for the night in the ancient Greek month of Boredom. Roughly September, on our modern calendar, the Eleusinian mysteries were held. These secret rites honored Demeter and Persephone's story in a sacred 9-day festival. Initiates believed participation could ensure a better afterlife, or at least offer peace with the natural cycles of life and death. Historians still debate what exactly took place. Some say it involved a symbolic descent into darkness and a climactic return into light, a kind of emotional agriculture, where the human soul was the seed. The quirky part, there's evidence that the final ceremony took place in total silence. Thousands of people gathered, and not a single one spoke. Imagine that an entire city holding its breath together, not out of fear, but reverence. Try getting that kind of focus without a smartphone in sight. Persephone places a small carved pomegranate on the altar, her fingers lingering on its smooth surface. It's not just a symbol anymore. It's her signature, her truth, her acceptance. She's no longer just Demeter's daughter or Hades's queen, she's herself. A dual citizen of two realms. A reminder that wholeness often requires holding both joy and grief in the same hand. Demeter approaches her sandals, brushing dry stalks, and rests her palm on Persephone's back. There's no speech, no divine proclamation, just presence. You feel it too, the shift in the air, the way the wind picks up slightly cooler now. It slips under your collar, a quiet hint of what's coming. The turn toward autumn. And that's the bittersweet brilliance of the myth. Just as the world reaches its peak, it begins to let go. This isn't the dramatic fall you might expect. There's no plummet, no fiery descent. Just a soft, almost imperceptible fade. The way a dream drifts as you wake. The way boredom isn't always about nothing happening. It's about realizing what's already passed you by. Demeter nods to the sky. The sun is lower now, casting long amber fingers across the field. You realize this part of the myth, the descent into darkness, isn't a punishment. It's a rest, a reset, the pause before something new. Persephone turns to you and says, "It's almost time." You don't ask for what. You already know. The wind rustles louder now, not in a threatening way, but like a soft announcement. You notice the leaves beginning to lose their green, replaced by sleepy hints of amber ochre and burnt sienna. It's not dramatic yet, but you can feel it. The great turning, the descent. And you don't panic because Demeter doesn't. She's calmer this time. Last year, the world cracked under her grief. This year, it sighs. And that sigh carries through the fields and forests, over hills and valleys, until it reaches you, just a gentle reminder that not all partings are tragic. Some are just the way things are. Persephone brushes the dust from her dress and smooths her hair, already darker somehow, as if shadow is seeping in gently from the tips. Her eyes hold both summer's fire and winter's stillness. It's wild how a person or a goddess can wear two seasons in their gaze like that. You try to hold on to the warmth while preparing for the cold. Here's your historical nugget to tuck into bed with. The ancient Greeks didn't have 4 neat seasons like we do. They typically divided the year into 3, spring, summer, and winter. Autumn was less of a standalone, more of a transition, a smudge between the lines. It wasn't its own thing so much as the moment when one thing became another. Which, honestly, sounds exactly like Persephone. And now, your fringe fact in some lesser-known Orphic versions of the myth Persephone is the creator of souls, not just their queen. According to these stories, human souls were born from her union with Zeus while she was in the underworld, and each one carried a divine spark and a yearning for the surface. Historians still argue whether this version was meant to explain reincarnation, spiritual longing, or just justify an awkward family tree. The point is, Persephone isn't just being taken, she chooses to descend. This time she walks toward the underworld like someone heading to a second home. There's no crying, no last-minute pleading. Just quiet footsteps on crisp soil and a final glance over her shoulder. Demeter doesn't chase her. She doesn't collapse or curse the gods. She watches, and then she exhales. You walk beside Demeter as she turns from the fields, the hem of her cloak trailing over dry leaves and brittle grass. Her steps are slower now, measured. She knows what's coming, the long months of waiting, the muted colors, the loneliness. But she's not unprepared. This year, she's built a rhythm into the quiet. There are jars to fill roots, to store seeds, to tuck away like dreams. She hums under her breath, something low, and even like the song of someone who's learned to embrace repetition. And maybe that's the trick to enduring the dullness. Not pretending it isn't there, but learning how to move through it like music. As night falls, the fields fall silent. The villagers light lanterns, tiny floating suns to hold back the darkness. One by one, the fires flicker and settle. You can almost hear the earth falling asleep. Demeter doesn't stop you from feeling the sadness. She just shows you how to hold it without letting it swallow everything else. You sit beside her on a low stone bench. She hands you a fig, plump, sweet, and slightly overripe, and says nothing as the stars blink awake. You chew slowly, savoring the simple sweetness. It tastes like endings, and patience, and the knowledge that even in retreat something is always ripening. Maybe this year you'll do it differently too. The days shrink now, not with fear, but with familiarity. The light doesn't fall, it folds. Gently, carefully. Like someone tucking in a child who already knows the bedtime story by heart. You stay with Demeter as the sky grays and the earth firms beneath cooling winds. She doesn't bother fighting what's coming anymore. The fields are quiet, the trees shedding their final layers, and still she walks the edges, watching, checking, tending. This isn't grief. This is preparation. Inside, her weather-worn cottage jars line the shelves, preserved olives, dried herbs, figs sticky with syrup. Demeter traces her fingers over each one, counting not what was lost, but what was saved. Persephone's gone again, but this time the silence feels different. Less like absence, more like incubation. It's easy to miss, but something is growing in the stillness. Outside, frost traces delicate lines across the window. You lean closer and see shapes in it, spirals, wheat stalks, maybe even a pomegranate or two. Nature has a way of leaving messages when you're finally slow enough to notice. Tonight's historical insight might surprise you in the agrarian world of ancient Greece. Fall and winter weren't considered useless seasons. They were deeply spiritual times for reflection storytelling and reconnecting with community. Farmers gathered to share myths, plan for spring, and honor the gods of the dark. Demeter, of course, reigned in absence. Her silence was worshipped just as much as her abundance. And your quirky fact for the night. Some ancient Greek women would bake small cakes of forgetfulness during the Eleusinian rites, tiny honeyed pastries believed to help them forget sorrow and better embody Persephone's descent. One recipe includes poppy seeds symbolic of sleep dreams, and occasionally mild hallucinations. A snack and a psychological reset, delicious and mysterious. Historians still argue whether these cakes had actual narcotic effects, or if the symbolism alone was enough to induce trance-like states. Either way, it's a testament to how seriously they took the liminal spaces, the in-betweens, the transitions, the boring parts. You sit with Demeter near the fire sharing roasted chestnuts and watching the flames lick the blackened logs. She tells you a story not of gods or monsters, but of soil. How it remembers everything. Every footstep, every fallen seed, every sigh of rain. Soil is the most patient witness of all. She explains how in winter nothing really dies. It just retreats, stores its energy deep inside away from frost and wind. Waiting isn't failure. It's biology. It's strategy. And so, as the cold deepens, you begin to reframe the boredom. You're not stuck. You're not useless. You're just underground for a bit. Like a bulb storing its bloom. Like Persephone moving quietly through the shadows. Like Demeter watching, listening, not mourning, but holding space. It's tempting to panic when nothing seems to happen. But maybe the nothing is something. Maybe stillness is just a quieter kind of growth. The fire cracks. A log shifts. You pull a blanket around your shoulders and lean into the hush. The season is changing, and you maybe are learning how to change with it. The silence now has settled deep. It's not just around you, it's in you, like snow that doesn't fall in flakes but in layers of hush pressing the world beneath a soft, muffled blanket. You walk through the sleeping fields, once golden, now brittle and brown, the stalks folded over like tired heads. Demeter's footsteps barely make a sound on the frozen path. Even the birds are quiet, their songs traded for feathers puffed against the cold. Winter, in this part of the myth, isn't violent. It's not a monster storming the gates. It's more like forgetting. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that rests your mind. The kind you welcome after too much noise. Demeter has no fire festivals now, no planting ceremonies. Just the long watch, the careful keeping, a rhythm of checking roots, touching bark, inhaling the cold to feel the outline of life still lingering below. Your historical companion tonight is something soft and strange. Ancient Greeks didn't just light fires in the winter for warmth. They believed that flame itself held sacred memory. Certain hearths, like the one in every Prytanean, the town hall of the polis, burned eternal flames believed to be lit by the gods themselves. Demeter, as a grain goddess, was often invoked during these quiet fire rituals, not as a goddess of action, but as the keeper of continuity. Quirky detail for you. The Romans later adopted Demeter as Ceres, and during certain festivals, women were forbidden to grind grain or light ovens so that the goddess herself could sleep. They literally gave her a break. Try that next time someone asks why you're not cooking dinner. Just shrug and say, the sacred grain goddess is taking a nap. Historians still argue about how much the winter rites involved fasting, dreaming, or trance. Some scholars point to regional variations where priests of Demeter would interpret dreams from supplicants who slept beside her temple stones, hoping to learn when Persephone would return, or what they must let go of to find peace. Back in your myth, the goddess of grain sits beside a frozen spring watching frost form spiderwebs on the stone rim. She touches the ice and it does not melt. Her power is not in forcing spring, it's in honoring its absence. Persephone is far below now in her shadow palace, her footsteps echoing off cold marble floors. She walks among the souls, some lost, some curious, some still chasing the warmth they left behind. She is not sad, not completely. She offers a different kind of light down there, faint but real. You sense her even in the upper world in small things, the shimmer of hoarfrost on a bare tree, the stubborn sprout of green moss beneath a log. The underworld isn't a void, it's a chamber, a root cellar of memory. Demeter smiles faintly as she uncovers a buried stash of apples still crisp. She breaks one open and hands you a piece. It's tart cold with a whisper of sweetness buried deep in the flesh. The kind of flavor you have to sit with. You eat slowly. The goddess leans back, sighs through her nose and says, "People think nothing happens in winter." And she leaves it at that. You walk with her again, neither of you speaking. You don't have to. The silence is thick enough to carry thought. And that thought is, this boredom is not the absence of magic. It is the space it needs to grow. The path turns to frost beneath your feet, every crunch like a slow metronome. Time stretches out, still, heavy. And in that stretch, in that seemingly endless wait, you realize this is where transformation happens. Not in the heat, not in the harvest, but here, in the quiet. By now you've almost forgotten the warmth of Demeter's summer. The days are short. The sun hangs low like it's unsure of itself, and the air has that dry metallic cold that pinches your nose just enough to make you feel awake. You follow her through the bare orchard limbs, black and knotted against a pale sky. It's beautiful in that bleak kind of way. Demeter doesn't hurry. She's never in a rush this time of year. She takes inventory in her head what endured, what failed, what might return. You realize she's not idle. She's just moving slowly enough to really see things, which, if we're being honest, is harder than it sounds. At the edge of the orchard, she crouches low to inspect a patch of garlic shoots stubbornly pushing through a pile of last autumn's leaves. She doesn't smile exactly, but you can tell she approves. Persistence, she murmurs, not flash. You try to remember that the next time your brain says, I should be doing more. Here's your historical nibble in ancient Greek homes. Winter wasn't just endured, it was deeply social. With farm work, minimal families huddled around the hearth, not just for warmth, but to tell stories, spin wool, and pass down memories. Women played a central role here, not just as keepers of the hearth, but as storytellers. It's entirely possible that much of what we know about the old myths, Demeter's included, survived because of these cozy, firelit narrations. And your quirky tidbit, some ancient calendars included dead months, where no agricultural festivals occurred. One of these, Posidion, named after Poseidon, was basically a sanctioned pause. A divine shrug. Historians still argue whether this meant true rest, or if it was just a way to pretend the gods were too tired to party. Either way, the idea of a built-in do-nothing month sounds oddly modern, and incredibly healthy. As you follow Demeter along the ridge, the wind gusts stronger, stealing your breath for a second. You tug your cloak tighter. She doesn't flinch. She just watches the horizon where the land begins to soften again. Not green, not yet, but less gray. I used to dread this part, she says softly, before I knew how to wait. You nod, like you understand, even if you don't. Yet. Down below in her shadowed palace, Persephone sits at her throne, not bored, not lonely, but thoughtful. She has grown. This is not a girl stolen. This is a queen choosing her half of the year. She walks the same halls Hades does, but she doesn't hide in his shadow. She walks beside it. That's a different kind of power. Demeter stops and presses a hand to the bark of a young olive tree. It's dormant, knotted tight inside its skin, but alive. There's movement, she says, even when you can't see it. You think about all the invisible things inside yourself, the slow rebuild, the quiet repairs. Maybe you're not stuck. Maybe you're just dormant. Reassembling. As night falls, a soft snow begins to fall more like ash than flakes. It dusts your shoulders, your lashes, your thoughts. Demeter doesn't brush it away. She lets it settle. Soon, she says, but not with urgency. Just truth. Soon. You lie back in the snow cold, soaking through your cloak, but you don't move. There's something sacred in stillness now, something necessary in the waiting. Your breath puffs like fog. Your mind unknots a little more. There's peace in this pause. Not nothing. Not boring, just the space before beginning. The snow deepens now, tucking the world into a soft, white hush. You wake slowly in Demeter's world, not from sleep exactly, but from stillness, from the long, careful quiet that winter demands. Around you, the trees stand like statues. The wind barely moves. Everything is resting. Demeter moves through the frost like someone who's finally made peace with her own boredom. Her steps are deliberate, her eyes calm. She doesn't fidget or fret. She just waits. And somehow that's more powerful than raging. You've heard of the winter blues, right? But Demeter, she's not blue. She's not anything in particular. She just is, which is something we often forget how to be. In the early morning, she scrapes frost off a stone table behind her cottage. There's nothing growing here now, no vines, no herbs. Just the pale skeletons of plants that once mattered a lot. And yet she doesn't grieve them. She just traces the shapes they left behind. Here's tonight's historical drop. During the Eleusinian Mysteries, initiates were sworn to secrecy about what they saw. But many ancient sources hint that part of the ritual involved walking through dark chambers experiencing sensory deprivation, sometimes even mock death before being led to the light. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about transformation. People didn't return from the rites with answers. They returned with patience. And, for your quirky tidbit, in some obscure offshoots of the myth, it's said that Hades never eats, only watches Persephone eat. It's symbolic, of course. Eating ties you to the earth, to mortality. But watching, that's timeless. Historians still argue whether this detail was a late poetic addition or a theological statement about the boundaries of divine hunger. Either way, it's unsettling, and weirdly romantic in a spooky sort of way. You watch Demeter pour hot water into a shallow stone bowl. Steam rises and she breathes it in deeply, eyes closed. The air is thinner in winter, she says. But sometimes that's how you learn what you really need. You're not sure if she's talking to you or herself. Maybe both. You wonder what Persephone's doing at this exact moment. Is she walking through her kingdom of shades, her hands brushing cobwebs and forgotten names? Is she lighting torches in underground tunnels, coaxing ghosts into conversations they never got to finish? Maybe she's resting too. Queen of the Quiet doesn't have to mean Queen of Misery. And maybe, just maybe, she's dreaming of return. Because something is changing now. It's faint, like a new note in an old song. But you hear it. Or maybe you feel it. The air smells different. Less sharp, more willing. The ground hasn't thawed, but it's thinking about it. A crack here, a squish there. The kind of tiny shifts you'd miss if you weren't moving this slowly. Demeter notices. Of course she does. She doesn't shout or leap for joy. She just lowers her hood. Not yet, she whispers. But almost. You walk back to the hearth. She stokes the fire not because she's cold, but because the flames remind her that life is still moving, even if it's small. Even if it's hidden. You sip something warm, probably barley tea or spiced wine or maybe just hot water with lemon and something bitter you can't name. It tastes like medicine. Or maybe memory. And as you sit there with Demeter beside you staring into the fire, you start to feel something you haven't in a while. Hope, no, too sparkly. Maybe readiness, not to run, not to bloom, just to begin waking up. A little, enough. The world doesn't explode into spring. It doesn't burst open like a party popper. No confetti, no sudden flowers. Just a soft shift so slow it might as well be imaginary. But Demeter feels it. You do too now. A smell in the dirt, a sound in the wind. The color of the sky still cold, still pale, but somehow friendlier. You step outside and squint at the horizon. The snow hasn't melted, but it's thinner. A breeze stirs the brittle stalks of last year's wheat. And somewhere in the middle of all that stillness you hear dripping. Water. That miracle noise. Demeter doesn't smile exactly. But she pulls her cloak tighter and walks toward the old grove, and you follow like a sleepy sidekick. A crow flies overhead, a rare bit of motion in a world that's been holding its breath for too long. You can't rush the earth, she says. but you can meet it halfway. Historical moment for tonight, ancient Greeks timed many of their major festivals with the shift toward spring. One of the most important, the lesser mysteries, held around February or March as a kind of warm-up to the Eleusinian rites. Participants prepared mentally, physically, spiritually. They fasted, bathed in rivers, and walked miles to sacred sites, not to celebrate spring, but to invite it. Quirky bit, some scholars think Demeter's rituals involved a kind of theatrical farming, where actors pantomimed sowing and reaping in sacred groves, even during the off-season. Historians still argue whether these performances were symbolic or practical, but either way, it's like spiritual cosplay. Dressing up like it's spring just to remind the gods it should be. Down below, Persephone moves too. The shadows follow her sure, but so does something brighter. She runs her fingers along the carved walls of her palace, the chill less biting now. She hums. Not a song exactly, more like a note, a vibration, and the whole underworld listens. She picks up the pomegranate again, studies it. She's not afraid of it anymore. She made peace with the seed. You remember the first time she left, when Demeter raged and the world cracked and everything fell apart. But now it's different. Demeter's not begging. Persephone's not weeping. This isn't a rescue. It's a reunion, and it's almost time. Demeter walks to a bare patch of ground and kneels. With slow, calloused fingers, she presses one seed into the earth. Not magic, just motion. You crouch beside her. She hands you another seed. It's not glowing or enchanted, just small, round. Very boring. You plant it anyway. Nothing happens. But it feels like something does, because you chose it. That's the whole trick of the myth, isn't it? Boredom, waiting cycles, they're not punishment. They're rhythm, a system so old it became sacred. The wind picks up, not icy now, damp, like it came from somewhere warm. You taste soil in the air, the kind of smell that comes before rain. Demeter closes her eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. You do the same. And beneath the quiet, beneath the cracked frost and forgotten roots, you feel her. Persephone, rising. You don't see her at first, but something shifts. The breeze changes, the silence stirs. A single bird dares a call from the treetops, half-hearted but brave. Demeter turns slowly, her face unreadable. She stands tall, taller than you remember, or maybe it's just that everything around her seems to lean in now. The trees, the wind, the ground itself, all holding their breath for something sacred. And then there she is. Persephone. She's not glowing. She's not floating on a golden chariot. She's just walking. Her dress is the color of old wine and new petals stitched with vines that still remember how to bloom. Her crown isn't gold, it's woven of twigs and tiny buds, the kind that will unfurl in days to come. Her smile is small, tired, but very, very real. Demeter doesn't run, she doesn't shout, she just opens her arms, and Persephone folds into them like she never left. You feel like you shouldn't be watching, like you're intruding on something private, but they don't seem to mind. You're part of this after all. You were here during the cold. You walked the frost. You planted the seed. Demeter brushes a lock of hair from Persephone's cheek. Was it hard? She asks. Persephone shrugs. Harder than last time. But I knew you'd be here. This, you realize, is not a story about punishment. It's not even a story about loss. It's about return. About rhythm, and that deliciously boring, beautifully repetitive miracle of coming back again. Historical tidbit for tonight, spring rites honoring Persephone's return were some of the oldest in Greece. Long before the flashy gods, Zeus Apollo, the gang people worshipped the earth itself. Fertility goddesses like Demeter and Persephone weren't just divine figures, they were the cycle. Without them, the seasons didn't turn, crops didn't grow, time itself didn't move. Ancient farmers would bake honey cakes and scatter them in fields to welcome her back. Literal sweetness in the soil. Your quirky gem in a lesser-known myth variant, Persephone emerges not just with a flower, but with a kitten. Yes, a soft, shadow-colored cat that had wandered into the underworld and decided to stay. Historians still argue whether this detail was symbolic of independence or just someone really liked cats. Either way, it's adorable. And now you'll picture her with a tiny, purring companion tucked in her cloak. Demeter and Persephone walk together now side by side through fields that are no longer dead, just waiting. The snow thins beneath their feet. Shoots of green peek through the dull ground. You spot a crocus, just one, blinking awake in the pale sun. You walk behind them, your steps lighter. The cold still lingers, but it doesn't bite. The sky stretches wider. There is nothing dramatic. No thunder, no fireworks, just thaw. And thaw is enough, because boredom, remember, isn't bad. It's a stage, a breath, a lull between the notes. And in that lull, the whole world catches its rhythm. You return to Demeter's cottage one last time. The hearth is still warm. The clay cups still hold the taste of grain and honey. You sit beside the fire, the soft hiss of new life outside your window. You can almost hear the seeds turning below. The gods didn't force the seasons. They became them. And now, so do you. Now, let everything slow down again. You've walked a full cycle. You've seen the warmth, the withering, the weight of waiting, and now you've touched the quiet hope of spring. Let your breathing match that rhythm. In, hold, out, long and low. The flicker of the hearth fades, and with it the last traces of winter's grip loosen. You're still but not frozen. You're calm but not gone. You're just where you need to be. Let your mind curl into the gentle edges of this myth, not a story of loud heroes or wild monsters, but of waiting women, wise gods, and seasons that shift softly. Let your thoughts settle like petals, or like that first soft snow. Neither dramatic nor dull, just part of the great turning. Feel the weight of blankets around you, the hush of the room, the stillness of the night. You've wandered long and far, through barley fields, temple halls, and silent groves. Now you rest. Demeter sleeps. Persephone breathes beside her. The seeds wait. So can you. No need to rush the dream. It will come. You've already done the hard part. You listened. And now it's time to let go. To drift. To fade. To sleep.